The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
This is one of those books that I've recommended a few times, and it either like really hits.
We've kind of identified there are 6 to 8 buckets in life. You've got your career, your finance, you've got, you've got your family and friends' life. So there are many buckets in life, and one of the buckets as well is spirituality. And I think reading this book has made me realize that I'm an absolute noob when it comes to spirituality. And that bucket of mine in my life is extremely empty, and I really know nothing about it. The story that really connected with me right at the start, the audience doesn't mind, I'm just going to read this story to everyone. There was once a beggar who sat on a box by the side of the road for many, many years. Day in, day out, swarms of strangers would pass him on their way, and the beggar did what all beggars do, and they asked for money. One day a traveler was passing through the town, and the beggar shouted, "Please give me some money." And the traveler said, "Sorry, I don't have any money to spare, but I'm curious about your box." "What about my box?" the beggar replied. "Well, what's in it?" The beggar responded, "I don't know. It's just an old box I found here that I've been sitting on for years." Persistent in his inquiry, the traveler asked again what was in the box, and the beggar replied, "I've never looked." And the traveler said, "Why not?" "Because there's nothing in there," the beggar howled back. And the traveler said, "Well, let's just take a look, shall we?" And finally, the beggar opens the box, and amazingly, he finds a treasure box filled with gold, and he's been sitting on it for years and just never knew about it. And the author then says, "What box are you sitting on?" And I guess what he's alluding to there is that all of us have this presence that we're not tapping into. The power of the now that we're not tapping into. Because like you said, I think we can start it off by talking about we tend to live too much in the future. That is me too. I don't live in the past much. Do you, Ali? But for me, I mainly live in the future.
Yeah, I'd probably lean more to the future.
Yeah. And isn't it weird how most of us compulsively live in the future? Mm. It's the classic, I will be happy when, I will feel good when, it's going to be a much better place to be when I'm on that holiday at the end of September. Mm-hmm. So we're just not present. How does this mind pattern operate in your life? Are you always trying to get somewhere other than where you are? Is most of your doing just a means to an end? Is fulfillment always just around the corner or confined in short-lived pleasures such as sex, food, drink, drugs, thrills, and excitement? Are you always focused on becoming, achieving, and attaining, or alternatively, chasing new thrills or pleasure? Do you believe that if you acquire more things and that you'll become more fulfilled, good enough, and psychological complete? Are you waiting for a man or woman to give meaning to your life? I mean, I spend so much of my time living in the future, dude.
Yep.
Well, one of the first things that the author talks about when you want to improve the quality of your life is the realization that you are not your thoughts and you are not your emotions. And that was a pretty big one for me because that's exactly what I thought I was.
Yep.
Right? Is that you're saying to me, I'm not my thoughts and I'm not my emotions. And to me, it was like, well, then what the hell am I? and it was just this really weird thing that again, a virgin experience. I think a lot of people who are further down the path of spirituality understand the concept that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions. But man, it was a scary realization because I lived my entire life kind of, the way I think is me. And the feelings I feel, yeah, of course that's me. That's who I am. And to be introduced to a concept where that isn't me and I'm the observer, I've got to practice observing the emotions and observing the thoughts, and you are the observer, not the actual emotion and thinking. That was a radical shift in my mind. Like the book says, it feels like you're unlocking a higher level of consciousness. Right? And I guess I tried doing it while I was journaling as well. And that's what made it really clear for me because I was just writing about the things I was thinking and trying my hardest not to judge it. Because I think the thing that I always do is I take data and I analyze it. and trying to take it a step further and just observing it without analyzing it or judging it, just looking at it, that was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. But after I successfully have done it a couple of times, you go, oh, wow. It kind of gives you this light, it gives you this separation from what I used to perceive as being me, meaning my thoughts and my emotions. So it gives you this little bit of separation for a few moments, and then you kind of go back to analyzing, well, you're feeling that because you're a piece of shit. Right? And then you judge it immediately, and then you go back. But you get that little moment of, and I like to use the analogy of the Matrix. Your mind is literally a matrix, and your emotions is a form of a matrix where you just get drawn back into it. And so you get these moments where you unplug and then you replug into the system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've felt real brief moments of that higher levels of consciousness, but man, it's a weird feeling.
I love it. It's cool reflection. And so when in light of that, do you think this is something that you'd practice more? Or do you feel like maybe not yet? Or what's your kind of thoughts around application?
It's made me aware of my addiction to thinking.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm an addict to thinking. And there's a note here as well, and I do apologize.
I think most of us are. And this is, I think he touches on it in the book a few times. It's like, this is probably one of the biggest things that's facing society at the moment, is that we're all conditioned collectively, like we're thinking animals. It's all about progress and achievement and getting there, and, you need this product to feel this way, you need to look this way to present, so people like you. Like there's all these things that are so reinforced to us. So I think that's one of the things that this book just kind of helped me with as well. It's like, okay, well, just kind of try to accept it the best you can. It's such a simple saying, but it just is what it is. And I think that's what this book at its core really helped me with, trying to implement into my thinking patterns a little bit more.
There's nothing wrong with cells dividing in the body, but if cells keep dividing, then it becomes a problem. It becomes a cancer, right? Mm-hmm. And same thing with thinking. Thinking is fine, but then if you overthink, it becomes a cancer. And I love that metaphor, because it really shines the light on the fact that we often think ourselves into more suffering and more pain than is necessary. Now, that was a big one for me, because that's what I do. And I think we live in a world now where, when you look at the hierarchy of needs, the most basic of our needs for most of us in the Western countries are met. And now we don't have to worry about food and shelter, etc. So for so many of us now, we live in our minds so much more because we have time to think. And to think of thinking as a disease, oh wow, is that a brand new concept to me? I always thought of thinking as one of the most valuable things that I do, because I always looked at thinking as, that's what's allowed me to strategize and plan the life that I have. That's what's allowed me to follow a strategy and execute on the strategy that has led me to the life that I'm living. Because the suffering that I think I've been experiencing in the last, maybe 12 months is overthinking, for sure. It's like another analogy. When you look into the sun for too long, you go blind, right? But you can glimpse at it real quickly. And I think I've just been looking in the sun for too damn long. I've been thinking too much about life in the future and not just living right now.
When you're thinking about the future and you can't really act on it, that's different to planning and taking, call it, creative action in the present moment. Mm-hmm. And when I actually, just as your friend, watching you do things, I actually think that a lot of your thinking, you do hit the higher points of, call it, creativity that comes from that present moment action, right? When you actually break it down, you spend a lot of time sort of in your workshop, in your study, writing, creating, developing. And I think that getting into call it that flow state, which I would say in this, it's you're using the mind as a tool and it's alignment. It's not really dragging around. But then there's probably that other side of the thinking where it might be around worrying about certain things playing out, overthinking dialogues in your head that you can't really do anything about. I think that's what the book kind of touches on. Not that thinking is like a disease overall, but it's, are you using that thinking, call it, with a quality of present moment awareness versus is it just thinking that's running through your head that's causing like stress or anxiety that you can't really do anything about? And that's kind of what I got from it, like, because it was one of the things I remember when I first read it. I'm like, so what? Do I just turn my brain off? Like, is that what this book is telling me to do? And I'm like, but then when sort of dug a little bit deeper, it's like, no, you still use the tool for solving problem, like for taking actions, for creating, for doing things that you love or whatever it is. But it's like, you can also then slow it down. Like, it can go into idle as well. Like, if we use the car analogy a little bit, it's like, you don't have to have the accelerator just pedal to the metal all the time. You know, you can sit there in neutral for a little bit and then accelerate just when you need to.
It's about learning how to use the tool and not have the tool use you, right? Whereas if you think about it, often when we're overwhelmed by our own thoughts, is it you controlling the thoughts or is the thoughts controlling you? And I think often it's the thoughts controlling us. There's a really interesting point where the author makes where, you know, you just touched on it now, and I want to continue with that thought path of the past and the future. We tend to either live in the past or the future. And this is the bit that really won me over, where he talks about how the only moment that truly exists is the now. Even when you think about the future is you thinking in the now about a now that's going to occur later.
That's right.
Right? And then the past is you bringing up in the now a moment that was in the past. So everything happens in the now. The future is a future now that's hasn't happened yet. And the past is a now that has already happened.
Yeah.
And then that was the moment where I went, okay, this isn't all kind of woo-woo and crazy. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
And so what that means is then the only control that we truly have, and like I've always heard people say this, and I always kind of at a surface level understood it, and where people say the only thing you have control over is the present. And that kind of thought process helped me understand, okay, so that's why this is the only moment in which we have control over. We only have control over now. We don't have control over future now or past now, just now. And future now and past now is just us in the now thinking about it. And it just went...
As funny as that sounds, the logic really does hold up. And again, people, like, if no one understands what the hell we're talking about and if you just tuned in... Even when we're planning for the future, we're planning for it right now, right? When we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about it right now. And... that was the logic of that really does hold up. I remember when I read it, I was like, yeah, that's true. Like, he makes a good point. There's the only moment that can be, I think that's one of the lines in the book, the only moment that can be experienced truly is the now. It's this moment right now. But then most of the time, we never give this current moment any real attention. Like, I think that's the difference. Sometimes you just get too far detached from this moment and you're just so... you know, either in the past or the future. And even though I can sometimes be aware of that feeling, it's still very difficult to then get back when you are in that state of future or past.
This kind of psychological fear is always something that might happen, not of something that is happening right now. You are in the here and the now, while your mind is in the future. And this gap creates what's known as an anxiety gap. And if you're identified with your mind and you've lost touch with the power and simplicity of the now, the anxiety gap will be your constant companion. So you constantly feel anxious. And he goes, you can always cope with the present moment, but you cannot cope with something that is only a mind projection. You cannot cope with the future, but you can cope with the now. And it's weird. It's like when you think about when people are suffering, and even when I'm suffering, we think things like, even while we're in the moment of feeling this, we go, how am I going to be able to live moving forward? Because this thing's happened. How am I going to be able to move on? And then when you think about it, well, you are going through it. You are actually coping with it. It's just when you start to remove yourself from the now and think, how am I going to deal with it tomorrow, that it causes you more pain in the present. That is just really interesting, that it's the gap that causes us the anxiety. Is when you live too much in the future, that's when it creates all of that anxiousness.
Yep.
And the fact that we can cope in the present, like that was another little one where I'm like, I think I'm hanging on to the monkey bars, right? I think I'm grasping it, but it's true.
Yeah.
In a sense that if you really focus on the moment, regardless of how hard things are at times, we're coping.
Yeah.
It's just when you start to live outside of that, you go, oh, I don't know how I'm going to be able to get through my day tomorrow.
Yeah.
When I think, oh man, my life sucks. And rephrasing it to, my life situation sucks. Not my life, right? I don't suck. I'm not a terror. Like, it's just this life situation. I think what that reframe does is it allows you to contextualize it and understand that it's just this moment in time and this situation that sucks. So again, time and time again, what I'm hearing even from you now is that it's that separation. It's being able to just separate from situations, from negative experiences, from emotions, from thoughts. It's that separation. It's the unplugging of the matrix. It's just getting out of that.
You become the observer of your thoughts, right? Like, I think he uses the word that you become like the silent watcher as these thoughts arise. And sometimes that's actually a pretty cool process. I know we've done this a few times where we've just been chilling out and it's like, all right, you see the thoughts sort of come into your mind and, you know, and rather than letting them take hold and then you're just thinking about that thought for 40 minutes and not really coming to a resolution, an alternative way is that thought sort of passes by. Yeah. You smile at it, you give it a wave and you let it pass on. And when the time is to actually act on it or do something about it, that's the time that you approach it. Or the other one, and I think he uses a couple of different models there where it's like, okay, well, you have a few different options, right? Like when thoughts arise, and especially really difficult thoughts, you can either choose to take action and then act on it immediately, right? Like he kind of goes on, well, can you do something about that thought right now? Then if not, then maybe you can just accept it. Right? Like you accept it, the situation as it is, and you don't identify with it, and you just let it exist, right? Which is nearly a mode of surrender. Or you leave. You get away from it. You get the hell away from that thought or whatever that situation is and leave it as it is. And I think that's a pretty cool, simple model. Like it doesn't obviously address everything there.
3 things.
Yeah. But it's like a 3-step kind of model just with dealing with thoughts, and then the idea is that from there you get into a more peaceful state where you can actually take a better quality of action potentially as well from that position. Like if you think about when we're really reactive and highly stressed out, like it's really hard to make good moves, right, from that position. Like how often when you're feeling a little bit on edge, like you'll drop something, you know, like you'll have a little car accident, or like these things always happen. It feels like when your mind is in that more elevated state, rather than if you're in a fully chilled position.
The power is in the now, because in the now is when you actually can solve it, or you can leave it, or you can accept it. You can't do those 3 things in the future, and you can't do those 3 things in the past.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, the power of the present and the now is that the reason why it's so powerful is because that's when you can act. That is the only time when you can act on your problems. And those are really the only 3 paths when you really think deeply about it. Because I started putting some of my own examples in my life through this little model, and I thought, it's so true. Because those are the only 3 options that are ever present to us. And it is in the avoidance of doing one of these 3 things that causes pain. It's when we avoid the problem. It's when we don't try to solve it. We don't leave it, and we just kind of don't accept it.
Yep.
That resistance is what creates the suffering. If you don't do some of this internal work, it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how many things you have. It doesn't matter how nice your house is. You know, I feel like to think that wealthy people don't suffer, that's one of the biggest illusions that there is ever. right? If you don't start doing some of this internal work first, getting that new place, it doesn't increase your enjoyment. Whereas I think if you do some of that internal work, and then maybe once you've kind of fixed some of the things that are going on inside, maybe then it helps you to be able to then enjoy the place if you do get it, right? I don't think it's about not getting it. It's just about not using that as a quick fix. Is because we're trying to escape for a moment that mind of ours that is always active, always controlling, always manipulative, right? That's why we seek out those momentary breaks. The importance of going into your body and not using all of the energy that you have in your head, but directing some of it down into your body. And when you direct it down into your body, that is how you become more present. That's why I guess in meditation, what you're focusing on is the breath. You know, taking that deep breath in and then feeling your diaphragm. And then the moment you do that and you go into your body, guess what? There's not much thinking happening.
So like even when you think about the core concept behind mantra meditation, where you just repeat the same word over and over in your head, that the science behind that is that it just steadies the stream. And then after a while, if you do that, most people recommend for 20 minutes or so, and you really focus in on those one words.
When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is get yourself into a comfortable position, whether you're sitting or you're laying down, and then just start to feel each individual part of your body. Start to just take your focus and put it all into your feet, and just really feel how your feet feels. Feel every single cell if you can. Go to that little, tiny little part. Just feel every single toe, feel the ball of your feet, and then start to feel your calves, and then up to your knee, and then feel your thighs, and then feel your bum, and then just feel every single part of your body. And as you're doing that, really just, when you're feeling, you're not thinking. You're just in your body, and you're not in your mind. And he says after you've felt every single part of your body, then just focus the energy as a wave going from the top of your head down to your toes, down your toes, up to the top of your head, up and down, up and down, up and down. And then just feel yourself as one whole body.